That better? Aha. In the Vision Dixie effort, it really came down to the people who have the networks, the leaders of all those informal networks out there in the county. They were literally recruited to sit around the table with the community leaders, and the community leaders pleaded with them to get out to their networks and get their people out to participate. And it is literally gathering those informal leaders in your community around a table and getting their eye-to-eye verbal commitment that, yeah, I'm going to go out to my network and make sure I've got people out to these meetings.
You know, these things work only to the extent there is broad public involvement. And kind of touch on that previous question, let me share a story related to Vision Dixie. In the event that we had to roll out the final report, and several hundred people show up, and there was an opportunity for questions and answers and comments at the end. And this gentleman in the back, gray hair, stood up and he said, "I've never seen anything like this in my life. I've been a mayor and a city councilor in different communities in the country. I never thought that bringing these people together would be possible. And I see that the real secret is it gives political cover to elected officials." And you know, that's not something you go around and talk about all the time. But the fact is that we're dealing with NIMBY attitudes and other things, and when you're an elected official, that's very tough. But if there's a proposal that's consistent with the broader vision, and the neighbors stand up and you know, raise the pitchforks, if you can say, "I hear you, and we want to make sure that we understand those concerns and mitigate them, but understand that we've had several thousand people participating in a process, and together we've come up with a direction that we're going as a community that creates benefits for all of us. This is consistent with it. It makes it a little easier politically." So to get back to how you get people there, Ken's right. We've done newspaper ads and TV spots and radio spots and everything else. And we stood in front of groups and said, "Okay, how many of you are here because you saw an ad in the newspaper?" And out of 100, maybe 3 or 4 raise their hands. "How many of you are here because you heard it on the radio?" Maybe 2 or 3 raise their hands and say, "How many of you are here because your mayor sent you an invitation saying this is important to our community and I'd like you to be there?" 95. So it's not easy work, but it's about getting the members of the steering committee that people trust to contact their networks, the mayors to say to their citizens, "I don't care what your view is, but I want you to know that this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity for us to make a difference in our community. Please do so." And you know, we had 20,000 people in the first process we did, and 3,000 in Dixie, and I think 7 or 8% of the population, the adult population in Morgan County, participated. So it can happen.
Free food's always good.
Free food, yeah, you're right.
This is for Alan. Did you turn it on? Okay. Working with the 2 states in the Cache Valley, how was that? Was there problems with that? Did you find good things, bad things? Comment on working with the 2 states.
Yeah. You know, we wondered what it would be like working across the state line, and frankly, it went very, very well. And it wasn't because of anything we did. It was because the citizens there feel a close affinity. They work together. They cross that line all the time. And they already had in place this Cache Valley Regional Council that was trying to coordinate on issues. Now, that doesn't mean everything was easy. Now, early on, there was some concern from those on the Idaho side saying, we're about 15% of the population in this valley. Are we going to be overwhelmed by the people on the Cache County side? And so I think there was just a lot of effort. People on Cache County side said, we don't expect you to contribute as much to the funding because you're a smaller group. We want you to be equally represented, however, on all of the steering committees and panels. So there was efforts at building trust by being generous on both sides. And part of it was a trust building process. You know, you don't start out all the time saying, okay, I'm in. It takes a little effort, step by step, to build the trust. And that was one of the best things I saw out of that whole effort, was that at the end, it was both states standing together saying this is important to us.
In Bear Lake County, people have been ranching most of their lives, had invested all of their money and efforts into that land, and that now they'd like to be able to sell it for $100 million or whatever and recoup off of that investment, that lifetime investment. And these plans, all the ones I've heard today, seem to be that no, we want to preserve those as open space. How do you convince somebody who has their lifetime spent there, now wants to be able to retire and have some money, that they should be able to give up 75% of their land for open space?
There are lots of tools. Sumner, you want to talk about it?
Well, having a lot of personal experience with that and having an old ranch property that we did some limited development on, normally what I would say to that group or that family, it comes down to an estate planning process, and you've been paying taxes. You may have zoning and property right privileges on your property, and to what extent do you want to cash in on those? So I can't tell you how many 4-foot diameter kitchen tables I've sat around and done conservation subdivision designs on a family's property that allows them to either maximize the amount of agricultural use that they have by keeping areas really big and bulky and intact, or you want to maximize the real estate revenues on your piece of property. And it's really up to that individual. In my scenarios where I work in communities that will and do allow conservation subdivisions, it's up to those individual families to decide how much they want to develop. But what I try to tell people is you don't have to completely max out or wall-to-wall your property. You've been here for generations perhaps, or you love the property, you've been the original stewards of this property. And if there's things that you want to keep, it actually benefits the real estate development side of it because it acts somewhat like a golf course. So you build houses along the fairway of a golf course, and those home prices go up because you've got the fairway. So you don't necessarily have to get each and every single dwelling unit via your development rights out of a project to actually realize quite a bit of the cash value of your property. So it usually just comes down to what's the balance, in a particular case. So that being said, when you look at your communities, does your community have the tools and the public policies to allow that conversation to go on? Because a lot of communities are not set up to do conservation style developments, and it becomes very arduous to get those kinds of things done if you don't have the basic policies in place. So it becomes more expensive, more confusing to the planning commissioners. City councils feel like they're being asked to do an about face and they're going in a different direction, and so on and so forth. So it's good to have at least at the general plan level, have policies that allow you to do these kinds of things. So I don't know if that answered your question or not.